councillors, and welcome to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, which is being undertaken virtually in accordance with the enacted government regulations during the current coronavirus pandemic. Before we start the meeting, can I remind all members of the following? Please ensure you mute your microphones when not speaking. Please remain focused on the topic being discussed. Please try to avoid repeating points which have already been made. Please avoid interrupting other councillors and respect the position of the chair. Please remember this meeting is still being broadcast in the normal way via Facebook Live. It's important, therefore, that members are aware that the public can hear what is being said and decided on, and the public can see councillors as well. Therefore, take care to prevent any background distractions. So, with these matters in mind, can I call on Sharon Sissons, please, from Democratic Services, to do a roll call of all councillors and officers to ascertain who is here? Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, can I ask the members in attendance to state you are present when I call your name? Councillor Wardle.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Foggin.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hannaford.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor David Henson.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Yolanda Henson.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb. I can't see. Councillor Michael Mitchell.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver. Councillor Warwick.
Present.
Thank you. And can I also ask the officers in attendance to state you're present when I call your name? Director Finance, Dave Hodgson.
Present.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Finance Officer, Michelle White.
Present.
Service Lead, Legal Services, Simon Copper.
Present.
Corporate Manager, Democratic and Civic Support, John Street.
Present.
Audit Manager, Helen Putt. I can see you just present. Thank you. Corporate Manager, Executive Support, Bruce Luxton. I'm not sure he's here yet. I'm not sure if Director Corporate Service and Monitoring Officer Barn Al-Khafraji is here yet. And we also have from Grant Thornton, Director of Audit, Julie Massey, and Engagement Lead, Grant Thornton, Jackson Murray.
Present.
Julie Massey, thank you, and Jackson Murray. Thank you. And you're supported by myself, Sharon Sissons, and Howard Bassett from Democratic Services.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you, members.
I can confirm we'll call it to start the meeting, and I can just see that Councillor Oliver's coming in, Chair, as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So, the first item on the agenda this evening is apologies. Do we have any, Sharon, please?
I have no formal apologies, Chair.
Thank you. I understand that Councillor Olwyn Foggin has to leave for another business at 6:20. So if we're still meeting at that time, she will be leaving at that time. Thank you for notifying us, Councillor Foggin.
Chair, I have to be in the same meeting, so could I also notify?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Right. So the next item of business, number 2, agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting of the 25th of November 2020. Members who were present at that meeting happy to approve these minutes as a correct record of the proceedings. Just a show of hands, please.
Thank you, Councillor Warwick. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chair, can I just say I've got dodgy email, so I'm going to keep my camera off.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so I look forward to signing the minutes in the future when hopefully there'll be a return to normal business. So the next item of the agenda is item 3, declarations of interest, which as any members of any disclosable pecuniary interest relate to business on the agenda and have not already been included in the register of interest, to declare them before any discussion takes place on the item. The next item of business, item 4, Local Government Access to Information Act 1985, the exclusion of the press and public. Well, as there are no part 2 items on the agenda, that does not apply. So item 5, External Audit Progress Report and Sector Update. Can I ask Julie Massey from the City Council's External Auditors, Grant Thornton, to present the report? And welcome to the meeting, Julie.
Chairman, thank you very much indeed. First of all, I'll just pass over to Jackson. He just wants to give a brief update in terms of final completion matters on 2019-20, and then I'll pick up to cover the 2021 plans.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Chair. So in front of you today, as you said, it's the normal progress report. So a couple of changes. Obviously, you've already mentioned and met Julie. So Julie will be taking over as the council's external audit engagement lead for the 2021 financial year. So I will be moving on to a different portfolio. That's to reflect wider changes within all of the engagement leads at Grant Thornton's portfolios. Essentially, we have ethical standards that we have to meet in terms of time on various clients. And although I continued on Exeter, unfortunately other colleagues couldn't. So it's part of that wider rotation rather than anything specific to do with Exeter. And similarly, your old external audit manager, Steve Johnson, retired following the last audit committee meeting. So Steve is now retired, and we wish him the very best in his retirement. Very briefly from me before I hand over to Julie to consider the 2021 financial year. At the last committee, we discussed the audit findings report and the findings from the council's external audits and also the annual audit letter. The only other pieces of work that we undertake for the council relate to certification of the pooling of housing capital receipts return, which we did in accordance with the procedures agreed with MHCLG and reported that in accordance with the national timetable. No issues were noted from that work. And we also undertake certification of the council's housing benefit subsidy claim on behalf of the Department for Work and Pensions. We issued our report to the DWP on the 12th of February. We didn't identify any new errors in our 2019-20 testing, but we did identify issues that we previously picked up, and under the guidance we have to test again. The values identified were very minor in terms of the errors identified, so £143 and 2,733 compared to a subsidy claim of millions. So we reported that to the department. They would then come back to the council with any follow-up queries should they have any. So the conclusion of that work concludes all of our responsibilities for 2019-20. So I just wanted to give the committee a quick update on that before I hand it over to Julie to discuss 2021.
Well, thank you very much for that. Firstly, whatever, I convey our best wishes to your career in the future and hope your colleague Steve enjoys his retirement.
Thank you very much. I'm sure he will. And who knows, we may meet again in the future.
Thank you. Right, members, do you have any questions, please?
I can't see anyone, Chair.
No, okay.
Chair, would it be helpful for me just to give a brief commentary to members about the plans for 2021?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
First of all, thank you for the very much for the warm welcome. It's a welcome back to Exeter for me. So I was actually involved on this audit a number of years ago. I think the last time I was with this council was back in 2012. So prior to when the Audit and Governance Committee was originally formed. So it's great to be back with the council and good to see some old faces. So really looking forward to getting reacquainted with both officers and members as part of the new relationship. In terms of 2021, we're at the stage now, as Jackson's talked about, we've concluded the 20 work now, and so our focus has now shifted to planning for the 2021 audit season. So my colleagues and I are now starting to pull together our risk assessments for this year's audit. And whilst there isn't anticipated a huge amount of change in terms of the accounting requirements for the financial statements for the authority, there are some big changes in relation to the work we have to do around the value for money conclusion. Some of that is summarised in the progress report that's been put to the committee, but effectively, as committee will recall from previous meetings, alongside the opinion we give for the financial statements, we have previously given an opinion in relation to our value for money conclusion. That binary conclusion in terms of qualified, unqualified will cease to continue under the new VFM code arrangements that have been issued now by the National Audit Office. And it's a much more broader narrative now in terms of what the new requirements will offer. Under the old arrangements, it was very much a reporting by exception in terms of if there were any significant issues that we needed to bring to your attention, we would report those to you. But now the requirement is to give a broad commentary across all areas, both positive and areas for improvement. And that covers three aspects under the code requirements. One is financial sustainability, the other is governance, and finally around improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. So we'll be working with officers over the coming weeks to seek information in terms of documentation to inform that review, and also be talking to a number of different senior management across the authority to inform that assessment. So that's really the key area of change that committee just need to be cited on, and obviously we will, when we've concluded that work, we will report to you a separate, what we call our annual auditors report, which is in addition to the report we'll give around the accounts, which will give that broad narrative commentary around the outcomes of that VFM work. So there's links in the progress report to some more the detailed guidance that the NEO has issued that helps inform the work that we'll do in this area. So members, please feel free to have a look at that in a bit more detail if you're interested in the breadth of the work that it will cover. It will certainly be broader than what you've been previously used to. So I'll leave it at that, Chair, but I hope that's been helpful just to give a bit of an introductory context of the changes for this year.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julie, for that. Thank you.
Chair, I can see that Councillor Mitchell has put his hand to speak.
Yes, Michael Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification on the value for money breakdown you've given us. What happens in relation to large standalone capital items? Are they considered in isolation any longer, or are they considered generically as a part of the philosophy and workings of the council?
Chair, through you, it's a bit of both, actually. I think in terms of what we would look at the council's overall arrangements in terms of its capital strategy and its capital programme as part of the wider financial strategy and financial monitoring arrangements for the council. But if there are within individual authorities particular one-off projects that obviously have had the need for some very specific arrangements, we know that there's lots of authorities out there that have, for example, got involved in a lot more of commercial type investments that may warrant a need to look at some specific projects in more detail. So it will vary from one council to another, but that will be part of the work that we'll need to undertake as part of the risk assessment to see if there's any specific areas like that in terms of individual projects that may require additional scrutiny.
Thank
you. Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions? Right, if there are no further questions, so can we note the position, please? A show of hands will be enough for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay.
Councillor Warwick, I know you want to keep your camera off. That's fine, just to say sorry.
Sorry, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, many thanks. Right, so that brings us to item 6, internal audit plan. The audit manager, Helen Putt, to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report about our work plan for the forthcoming year, the 21-22 year. I'll take the report as read, but just draw your attention to a couple of things, and that's that during the year we were required to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic by helping with business grants and things, and you'll remember from previous meetings that we had to postpone some of our audits and take them forward to the next year, and obviously that's been incorporated into our plan for the forthcoming year. And the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to is to do with housing benefits. You'll note that that's not been included in the plan this year, and that is because of the significant improvements of the internal control environment and the improvements in accuracy in the housing benefits. So that's actually been reduced to a medium risk, which means that at the moment, we would only be auditing that every other year. But obviously that's reviewed. The risk rating is reviewed every year. So it may be that might increase, but we'll see. The details of the plan are at Appendix A. So I don't know if there's any questions that you have about the plan.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that. All right, members, do you have any questions? I am aware that Councillor Rob Hannaford wrote in with a question, and also Councillor Michael Mitchell had a number of questions. So, gentlemen, if first of all, Rob, if you could read out your question and we'll try and deal with the answer.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have it in front of me, but it was basically to inquire what we were doing about encouraging and securing more apprentice accountants at the council. I think this has come up a lot through the audits that we need to grow our own within our department. So it was really just to inquire, particularly with the apprenticeship levy and other matters, what progress had been made or what's going to be made shortly. Because I think particularly at the moment, with the economic and unemployment situation, it'd be good to offer, an opportunity for some young people to come forward and take up that career within the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Helen, I wonder if you might be able to elaborate on this one.
Yeah, we had a response from our HR manager on this matter. I'm just trying to find the reference to it. Michelle, are you able to answer that question?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine, Helen. So yeah, like Helen said, we have got a response from the HR business manager, more of a council-wide response in terms of apprenticeships and not specific to finance, but then I can touch upon our approach to apprenticeships in finance, if that's okay. So in terms of the advice from the HR business manager, I'll just read out what we've had through. So what we're saying here is that the council does offer apprenticeship opportunities across the organisation. These are not part of a corporate initiative, but rather where individual services have identified an opportunity from analysis of their workload and the skills and resources required to deliver that workload. So at present, we have 4 apprentices, 2 in legal, 1 in procurement, and 1 in communications. At the moment, again, in terms of finance, I can say that we've had quite a positive experience of apprenticeships. So we recently supported an individual through their AAT finance qualification, which they completed before lockdown, so in April last year. And during that time, they managed to secure a permanent position within the team. They are now AAT qualified and in our Exeter services team, so that was very positive. Moving forward, that does mean that at present, all our accountants are fully qualified and all our technicians do possess AAT. So as it stands, we haven't identified a training need, but we keep that under review as part of the growth and development process. So I don't know if that is sufficient, Councillor Hannaford. I'm happy to sort of make further inquiries.
Thank you, Michelle. Through you, Chair. Yes, that's very helpful. It's good to see that we are encouraging apprentices to come through the council, and perhaps some of that can be put in the minutes, Sharon, to make sure that the rest of the council are sort of appraised and updated on that work, not just for the financial department, but just across the board. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Michael Mitchell, you put in some written questions as well. Would you like to Would you like to read out the
Yeah.
questions
Yeah,
you have,
more-
please? And
More than
deal
happy.
with them?
More than happy. There's only one on this particular item. The others are item 8 and item 11.
Yes, thank you.
This is on regarding the item on page 33 about carbon neutral. Regarding the audit arrangements concerning the council's carbon neutral ambitions, what is meant by the phrase general assurance, which is used as a level of audit quite often in the report? And how does this particular level of assurance relate to measuring specific measurable outcomes that we would hope to achieve through a carbon neutral agenda?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Thank you, Chair. The word general assurance that we would, the term that we would use and apply in this situation is we'd be looking for some sort of strategy or policy and then looking to provide assurance that we're complying with that strategy or policy. And if there wasn't, we'd be looking to recommend that there was something in place. You'll also note that Exeter City Council has aspirations for net zero by 2022, and we'd be wanting to ask what that looks like, and then the measures that are used for that is what we would be checking against. And it might be that the audit would be in helping them develop means of measurements of the outcomes.
So it's not intended to be a light touch approach then?
Well, we'll be looking at it in depth within the time constraints that we have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, members? Right. Well, if not, can I ask you to approve the 2021-22 internal audit plan, and a show of hands will be enough, please. Thank you. Okay.
Henson,
Thank you
sorry,
very.
I'm David Henson as well. Sorry, I know it's hard when you. Thank you very much. I can confirm that's a unanimous vote to approve the recommendation.
Right, fine, thanks. So that's approved then. Thank you. Right, so item 7, the internal audit progress report Q3. And the audit manager, Helen Putz, will present this one. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the progress report for the third quarter from the 1st of October to the 31st of December. The report covers the work that we've carried out and the emerging issues during that time. The progress against the plan, which was revised, as I've already mentioned, is good. However, due to the ongoing pandemic, we've once again had to make an amendment to our plan as a result of having to help out with the processing of grants. And so what we were having to do is, following a request of the Director of Net Zero Exeter and City Management, is to postpone the health and safety and the equalities and diversities audits to 21-22, along with the insurance audit, which is a low risk area. And you will have seen that they have been incorporated into the plan for the 21-22 from my previous report. So in Appendix A, you can see more details of the actual work that we've done. And the reports that have been finalised during this quarter relate to the corporate property assets, and we're pleased to be able to provide substantial assurance to that area, and council tax, where we have satisfactory assurance. And you'll see also that there was some, I've detailed at the end of that appendice, the additional work, details of the additional works that we've been carrying out in relation to the COVID business grants and the assurance work that we've been required to do for the government in respect of that. Also, along with the movement of the leisure contract back in-house, we were able to assist with some work with that. And we've done some work on the furlough scheme. Is there any questions relating to the work that we've been doing?
Thank you, Helen. Any questions, members? Right. Well, if there aren't any questions then, so do we note the internal audit progress report?
Sorry, I wasn't quick enough on my buttons. On the report, there are some of the sort of status boxes as medium to low, but there also seem to be a lot of the boxes that are empty with no description at all. So it's unless I've missed something, it seems to be a bit difficult to actually gauge where we are on some of those topics. I'm particularly thinking of Appendix A.
Are we talking about the progress report?
Yes.
So it says the report status in the second column. So that shows whether it's in progress or whether it's been finalised. If it's finalised, the report was brought to the committee in a previous meeting in a previous quarter. Some of the audits are in progress. I've given details of the reports that were finalised during this quarter. Where it says about the risks, that's to do with the risks in the report, the findings that we had.
So
does that help?
Well, yeah, well, partly. So unless I can't actually see it properly on my screen, the beginning of the report alludes to a traffic light system, which is obviously red, amber, and green. Is there any red, amber, and green actually in the report itself?
Yeah, the green would relate to substantial assurance and satisfactory assurance. The amber is limited assurance, and red would be no assurance. Within the table, you can see in the overall opinion, for example, there under income management, we've got satisfactory assurance, the same with creditors.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is but it's not actually in red, amber, green, is it? It's a verbal presentation.
Would that help in future if within that table?
Oh yes, because I think a lot of
those.
I think firstly, you allude to a traffic light system in the beginning of the report. So therefore, I think you ought to carry that through to the rest of the report, because I particularly think members generally, we tend not to worry about things that are in green and worry more about things that are amber and red. So there seems to be a dichotomy in the way that the report is presented. Obviously I can't speak for other members, but I certainly would, focus in on certainly the ambers and the reds first.
Certainly, I can do that. We can do that for the future. Yeah, it was a good point.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Dave Hodgson, I don't know if you wish to speak.
Is that?
Yeah, I'll just to clarify on the question around medium, high, low. Why some have got high, medium, low. It's only reported against those that have been completed. So where there are blank boxes, that's because the audit hasn't yet been completed. As soon as it's completed, you'll see. And high, medium, and low shows the number of risks that were identified when the audit's been completed, and gives you a sense of how worried you should be. So if there's a lot of high risks, then they're things that the council needs to address with a sense of urgency. Medium, low are things that will be discussed with the service manager, and the most appropriate way forward will be determined. I agree. I think the traffic light system putting the green, amber, and red on this report would be beneficial for members, who should also note that there will be a lot of white for those that are still in progress and the decision hasn't been taken, but I think that would be helpful.
Thank you. Any further questions, please? Right, so the recommendations are that the internal audit progress report for the third quarter of the year be noted, and the amendments to the internal audit plan detailed in section 8.2 be approved. Is that agreed, please? A show of hands.
Thank you. I can confirm that's unanimous vote to approve the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sharon. Right, so item 8, we move to that now, is the Model Code of Conduct. And I understand that Simon Copper, our legal officer, is going to introduce this item. Simon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the report of the Monitoring Officer, Barn Al-Ghafarji, and it concerns the proposal to approve the new Model Code of Conduct, which is attached to the report. The new Model Code of Conduct has been drafted by the Local Government Association, and the proposal is that it takes effect from the Council's annual general meeting, which is scheduled to take place on the 18th of May this year. By adopting the new code now, this will ensure that all new councillors elected in May 2021 will be bound by its contents. The monitoring officer and deputy monitoring officers, that's me and John Street, who's also present today, have considered the new model code in detail, and we recommend its adoption. The recommendations for the committee to consider are set out at paragraph 2 of the report. Just by way of background, members will recall that the Local Government Association has been undertaking a review of its model code of conduct for some time now, and this authority submitted comments as part of the consultation exercise which took place last year. This authority broadly welcomed the proposals, and in particular the clarity in how it explains and identifies the obligations placed on members, which to some extent is lacking in our current code and those of other authorities. The draft code was previously presented to this committee on the 22nd of July last year. Now, as members will be aware, the Localism Act required each local authority to adopt a member's code of conduct. The aim of it is to promote and maintain high standards of behaviour by its members and any co-opted members. The new model code of conduct helps to maintain the openness and accountability of members by clearly expressing the obligations imposed upon members. And you'll note in particular that the code is worded more clearly. It has a greater level of explanation of obligations imposed on members. It helps to ensure greater consistency across the country between authorities as to the model of a code of conduct. And it now incorporates the concept of what are known as Part 2 interests, even though this authority had incorporated provisions on Part 2 interests. It wasn't previously present in the model code, and that is now incorporated as well. And the new code also incorporates a section on acceptance of gifts and hospitality. There is one thing that's missing from the code, and members will note that the ability to grant dispensations, which is reserved to the monitoring officer and is a statutory function, isn't set out in this code, and so we're recommending that the ability to grant dispensations is added to this code. The code's been brought to the attention of the Council's independent persons. Both of them support the new model code. There is one comment that I should bring to your attention from Professor Brian Kirby, and he's referring to paragraph 10 of the model code, and he refers to the reference to Christmas gifts, and he suggested that instead of using the word Christmas, that the code refers to gifts generally, and clearly that is a matter for you members. On the basis that the Council ultimately approves adoption of the new code, you'll see from the recommendations that it will be necessary to make some amendments to the Constitution, and that will take place subject to your approval. And so, members, the recommendations are contained in Part 2 of the report. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Simon. Any questions, members? I understand that Councillor Michael Mitchell was good enough to put in a written question before, so we'll let Michael Mitchell go first.
Thank you, Chair. Just really a point of clarification. Increasingly, as community councillors, you're often approached by groups in your community who've got charitable aims and purposes, and when they become established, apply for charitable status, and often get councillors involved on the boards or effectively as trustees normally of named local charities, which are then registered with the Charity Commission. is there any requirement within these regulations for councillors to register trusteeships to outside bodies? Because I did note that they did broaden it in regard to directorships.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Well, the position is, well, there are a number of parts to this, I think. Where the trusteeship is remunerated, then it should be registered as a disclosable pecuniary interest. And clearly, that's not always the case, that there'll be any payment for that post. So otherwise, members would only need to declare a trusteeship if the member considered that they had a Part 2 interest, basically where the matter affects the financial interest and or well-being of the member, and a reasonable member of the public, knowing all the facts, would believe that it would affect the member's view on the public interest. So you'd expect a declaration in those circumstances, but that would be fact sensitive, and it would depend upon the report that was being considered at the time. I'd also add that the new code provides for registration in relation to any body of which the councillor is a member or in a position of general control or management, and to which the councillor is appointed or nominated by the council. So, for instance, we have Exeter Homes Trust, for example, and Exeter Canal and Quay Trust. So in those circumstances, we would expect members to declare those interests.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, please?
Councillor Oliver's raised her hand.
Yes, Councillor Oliver, please.
And you're muted, Councillor Oliver.
Sorry. I'm very interested in your question, Michael. I think potentially this overlaps with the discussion or a paper coming on membership of outside bodies, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. If the directorship wasn't remunerated, I would have thought that would be, as Simon has explained, councillor representation on an outside body. If it isn't, if for instance it's a trustee of, say, a local community group, I think I'd be interested in just looking a bit more at that when we discuss outside bodies. For instance, I'm a representative of the council on 2 outside bodies, which I was allocated when I became a member. One of those actually isn't a charity, it's a private business, although it is cooperatively run and has social enterprise aims, and I don't have a problem with that, but I'm actually a director on that board, which I didn't particularly necessarily understand as a new councillor, but there's not an issue with that. But the CAB specifically requested that I didn't join their trustee board as councillors had previously, but I attended as an observer, and they found that very helpful, and that's the approach they're continuing with now for future council and city representatives. So perhaps I'm straying into another committee meeting here, but I think anything, it may not be pecuniary interest, but I think, for instance, if I was on the trustee of any sort of particular charity, I think that would be something that ought to be in the public domain as a councillor. But not me to say, obviously, but useful discussion. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. I think Councillor Oliver, you raise a really good point, and clearly the paper looking at membership of outside bodies should explore that in more detail.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any further questions, please?
Chair, I did put my hand up, but I don't know whether you can see it or
I
not.
can't see it. Right, okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, yeah, clearly, I mean, I do welcome this new sort of reaffirmation of how people should behave and treat other people. I've got a couple of questions. I mean, certainly, I have been a councillor a long time, but I think I said at the last meeting when it came up in July, of recent times, you know, and before the pandemic, I was concerned about some of the behaviour of councillors, particularly to staff, and I think that needs to be really underlined again, because you know, I know sometimes situations can become heated, but some of what I had saw, and I think I raised this with you, John, really I felt had gone past the point that it should be tolerated. So with that in mind, clearly we've got elections coming up, and new members will be signed up to this, which is great. But often it can be very difficult for staff to feel comfortable perhaps to raise an issue or to feel like they can do it. So what help and support is there for staff and officers to raise it? And also, is there a sort of time limit when, you know, perhaps something's happened in the past and it was logged, but officers have felt not able to progress it, but, you know, can they perhaps, when they feel a bit more comfortable or another incident's occurred, would that be taken into account as part of the process? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I think as a general rule that officers are aware of their ability to complain where appropriate about member conduct, but that would be a matter particularly dealt with by democratic services. So it might be a question that could be put to John Street.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you, Councillor Hannaford. Yeah, there is also reference within the council to a whistleblowing policy as well, which would allow some form of anonymity in any complaints that come forward, as well as the council complaint system that's available. But as you know, we work very closely with councillors in the first instance to try and, officers and councillors to try and iron out any issues that there may well be. But if need be, the monitoring officer would then be involved in an investigation into any such complaints, and would at such occasions also involve a discussion with one of our independent persons as their view on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I couldn't see any, Chair.
Right, thank you.
Chair,
So,
just before you go to the vote, Mr. Copper suggested that the word
yes, I was
Christmas,
just about to mention
sorry,
that, John.
I didn't want
yeah,
to.
so it's going to delete the word Christmas from 10 on gifts and hospitality. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, fine. That's fine. Thank you. So, members, it's recommended that, subject to taking the word out Christmas from 10 gifts and hospitality, we approve the model code of conduct appended to this report with effect from the annual general meeting of the council scheduled to take place on the 18th of May 2021. That we approve the inclusion of a section in the Constitution which allows for the monitoring officer to grant dispensations to members as appropriate. And 3, authorises the monitoring officer to amend the following areas of the Constitution, if appropriate, where reference to the members' code of conduct is also made. That's the General Principle of Good Conduct, Section 5B of the Constitution, the Protocol on Member-Officer Relations, Section 5E of the Constitution, and Local Planning Code of Conduct, Section 5I of the Constitution. So those are the recommendations before you, members. Can I have a show of hands for that recommendation, please?
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that's a unanimous vote to approve the recommendations.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So, thank you. That takes us to item 9, Code of Corporate Governance 2021-22. And the Director of Finance, Dave Hodson, will present this report. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual update of the Code of Corporate Governance. I can literally say this year it has been rolling over the date to the following year. There's no changes to the code itself. As a reminder to members, this underpins the annual governance statement, which you will approve at the next committee as part of the statement of accounts process. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. Any questions, please, members? No.
Can't see any, Chair.
Can't see it, no. Okay, thank you. So, the recommendation is that this committee supports and council approves the Code of Corporate Governance for 2021-22. Can I have a show of hands on this, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that's a unanimous vote to approve the recommendations.
Thank you, Sharon. That brings us to item 10, Local Government Ombudsman's Annual Review of Complaints 2019-20. And the Corporate Manager Executive Support, Bruce Luxton, will present this report. Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. So to be brief, firstly, this report gives you some background to the role of the Local Government Ombudsman, who I liaise with in my role. Thankfully, that's fairly infrequent because the council has a good record with the Ombudsman. And secondly, the report presents a summary of complaints to the Ombudsman for the year ending 31st of March 2020. Just to summarise that Ombudsman summary, I confirm there are no formal public reports, those are the reports that tend to be for serious and wide-ranging findings of maladministration. So there are none of those to bring to your attention. Of the list that's in the report, you'll see that just 2 cases were investigated and upheld, one in planning, one in environmental health, but the Ombudsman did not find fault in the substantive matters that were complained of. So that's a quick summary for you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Any questions, please?
Chair, if I may, I think it's more of a comment than a question to Bruce, but I mean, I think it's quite marked that we've only had those 2 cases go to the Ombudsman, thinking about the breadth of what the council covers and what we're involved with as a city council. You know, the relatively low level of complaints that have actually come forward. And, you know, I think that is a reflection. I hope that a lot of work goes in to mitigate things before things get escalated. And I think, you know, the Chair, I think the committee should commend, you know, the low level of complaints. I think it's quite marked. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Councillor Hannaford. I would endorse that as a chair. Does the committee agree with that? We commend the council for their work in this area. Thank you. So, if there are no more questions, can we note the reports on a show of hands, please?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm it's a
Thank you.
vote to approve the recommendation to note.
Thank you. So that moves to item 11, which is final item on the agenda, the review of the corporate risk register, and the audit manager, Helen Putt, will present this report. Helen, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report of the corporate risk register from the Chief Executive and Growth Director. It's just an update of the corporate risk register. You'll see that there have been some amendments, quite a few updates to the risk register. The first being the counter-terrorism and community cohesion safety, which is risk reference number 2. This risk has been managed to a low risk and will be removed from the corporate risk register and monitored at a service level. The same with the delivery of the Sport England and local delivery pilot outcomes, which was risk 3. The lack of proactive and preventative investment and maintenance of assets, risk 4, that's been managed to a low risk and will now be managed at the service level. The information governance failure, risk 5, this risk has also been managed to a low risk and will now be removed from the corporate risk register and monitored at a service level. Strata have confirmed that they have appropriate protections in place relevant to the type of organisation and data that we hold, but this will obviously be continued to be monitored. You'll see in 8.6 a lack of leadership capacity to effectively deliver additional council objectives and priorities, which is risk reference 7. The ownership of that risk has been moved to the council's executive. 8.7, inability to deliver carbon neutral aspirations for Exeter by 2030, which is risk reference 8. This risk has increased from medium to high. and the report explains some of the reasons behind that. 8.8, the inability to manage and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, which is risk reference number 13. This has been moved from high to low, and this is because the risk has now needs to focus on recovery rather than the actual pandemic, because that risk has actually, we've been managing that. The two risks that remain high risks are maintaining the financial stability of the council, which is risk reference 11, and the increased costs of St Tidwell's Point and bus and coach station, which is risk reference 14. An update of each risk can be found in the notes column of the corporate risk register at Appendix A. I'm happy to take any questions on behalf of.
Yes, thank you, Helen. Much obliged. Members, any questions? But I am aware that Councillor Michael Mitchell put in a written one. So, Michael, firstly to you.
Thank you, Chair. There are 4 different parts on this report, so I think it'd be easy if I read all 4 out, then members can see if they want to add anything to the particular points I'm raising. 2 in regard to the written preamble on 8.7 on page 94. In the light of the comments in this report, should Exeter City Council carry out an urgent review of its carbon neutral aspirations to ensure it can meet its existing commitments, particularly in the light of the comments from Devon County Council in regard to that, because action is suggested. In regard to 8.9 on the same page, and was mentioned again St Sidwell Point, for some time we have noted as a committee that contractual discussions were taking place about potential existing additional costings. Are we any clearer as to whether any further funding for this project will be required prior to its completion? And the other 2 relating to detail on the report with the colour codes on it. First is on page 99 relating to Sport England. To what extent has the review of governance taken place, which is mentioned, and the strategy been approved for local community involvement, which were the targets? If these targets for 2019, because it states there were 2019 targets, have been implemented, have they been subject to an audit? And lastly, on page 101, reference 5, does the operation of home working and hybrid working raise IT security issues for our staff in regard to using home networks rather than the strata based in the building? Thank you.
Well, thank you for those questions. Helen, are you able to provide any answers on these?
I wonder if Dave would like to provide some answers to the first 2 questions, and I'm happy to pass on answers to the questions on the Sport England question and the question on the home working.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. Would you like me to start, or Dave, would you like to start?
I'll go.
Dave, you start. Yeah,
we'll do it in order. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mitchell, for the questions. So, in respect of the carbon neutral questions, good question. As you know, this was the aspiration of the council is to deliver carbon neutral by 2030, but it's always been made clear that from a financial point of view, we required the support of partners, both local, regional, and indeed national, in order to deliver this. I think it's fair to say that that's a question for the executive in terms of the review, and I will certainly put that forward to them. Perhaps that's a question that may be appropriate at council, because ultimately, obviously, it will be a councillor's decision in terms of it. But you know, a fair point. In terms of St Sidwell's Point, no, we're not at the point of a conclusion. Discussions are still ongoing. It's very much in the hands of our legal team, along with our own experts, working with Kia to discuss the understandable challenges that they've had as a result of the pandemic. As soon as that is concluded, and if any further financial funding is required to deliver that project, it will of course come back through the executive to full council, which is the only mechanism for approving any additional funding required by the council. So as soon as that's in a position, that would come to council. So you will have the full chance to debate that before it's done.
Could you just clarify on that on Dave? Presumably that decision or that matter will have to be resolved before there's a handover officially of the building.
So in terms of the thing, it's ongoing. I would hope it will come before the handover of the building. I'm not sure from a legal point of view whether that's correct. That would need to be determined prior. Sorry, that's a legal point.
I think that's a matter for the negotiations which are taking place between our officers and Kia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Helen, did you want to follow on from that?
Yeah, so with regards to the Sport England risk, a review of governance has taken place and was implemented from June 2020. The strategic governance is held at Liverpool Exeter Place Board, and a partnership oversight group and delivery management team have been established. A community engagement strategy is currently being developed and based on the learning from the Wellbeing Exeter and insight from work undertaken in Womford through the sounding board led by the local residents. This is currently at the design stage and will be approved through the governance process. We've not done an audit on this area yet, but you will note that it has been included in our audit plan for 21-22. And the 2019 target dates, which were there, referred to in the corporate risk register. Those actions have now been completed, which is allowing the risk to be assessed to low, but the target dates weren't updated. And then with regard to the risks of home working and whether this raises any further risk, I've been advised by Strata, and we've been provided with assurance that there is no raised security issues in working from home. They've also advised that when they have had some external reviews, they've actually received positive feedback on the security measures, particularly relating to the size of the organisation that we are. There's always more that can be done, but that has to be balanced with the costs that would be associated with it. So it would, you know, I think that what we've got in place is quite good for the size of the organisation that we are.
There was just as members of the public, we're also being told to be concerned if you're using wireless networks, coding, etc., when we're using effectively commercial broadband. And I was just concerned whilst they're using Exeter City Council equipment, they're actually linking into their own, presumably their own networks at home.
Well, they would be using Wi-Fi, but the technology that we're using. Yeah, I can find out more details on that. I'm not a technician on IT, but yes, if you'd like more detail on that, I'll speak to the security people and I'll take that forward to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions on this matter?
Councillor Atkinson, Chair.
Yvonne Atkinson, please.
Thank you. Hello. In view of the email that we got today about the health and safety executive prosecution, I'm just wondering whether we should have a risk added about health and safety. I know this is identified as the corporate risk register, and that related to a housing revenue account contractor in relation to council housing. But I've not seen, well, this committee hasn't reviewed a separate register as far as I'm aware for that. So I just would welcome some comments on that, seeing as that obviously gave rise to, well, some fine, which we want to make sure that we don't go down there in future. Obviously, the report that we had was that is unlikely to happen, but I would have thought this would have been something that should have been on the risk register.
Thank you. Can anyone comment on that?
I think Dave Hodgson has his hand up, so
Please, Dave.
Yeah.
Thanks. As a member of the Strategic Management Board who owns the risk register, I'll take that. It's a fair point, and health and safety is one of the key issues that we need to address as a local authority constantly. It was felt we have pretty good procedures in place in respect of health and safety. This isolated incident notwithstanding. So as an authority, your strategic management board all sit on a health and safety committee that sits above a health and safety representatives group made up of officers across the council. So from a point of view of the council's response to health and safety, we feel that the systems we have in place are adequate to support, and clearly issues like this will be reviewed by the committee to see if there's any learning that needs to be undertaken. If, of course, members feel it is an area that we are at a higher risk of, I'm happy to take that back to the Strategic Management Board for reconsideration.
Thank you, Dave.
Any views? If I could just come back on that. I mean, obviously, what the corporate risk register would record would be the level of risk, and then mitigation measures, and then obviously a re-evaluation of the level of risk. I think it would be useful, having given what we were sent today, to have some assurance that mitigation it's been put in place. Obviously, it's monitored by an officers group as an operational matter. I understand that, but given the fact that we were prosecuted, I think it should have escalated to a corporate risk, and be monitored by an assurance being given to this committee. That's my view. Not in the normal sorts of course of events. Obviously, I'd expect the management team to manage those operational risks, but given what has happened, surprised it's not on here.
Thank you. Any members got any views on that, please? No? No views on what Yvonne has said? Right, okay, thank you. So, the recommendation on this is to note the report. So a show of hands will be enough on this, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is that
unanimous vote to approve?
Thank you very much, Sharon. So that brings us to the end of this meeting, I think, and the date of the next meeting is on the 28th of July, 2021. So thank you for attending, and I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone. Bye.